A croc that outsmarted all hunters, a tiger with 400 kills, and a wolf that haunted a town. These animals weren't legends, they were real. There are big crocodiles. And then there's Gustav. Locals in Burundi speak of him in hushed tones, as if he might be listening. They say he's over 20 feet long, weighs a ton, and has survived more bullets than some military vehicles. He's not just big, he's terrifyingly smart. For decades, Gustav ruled the waters of the Ruzizi River and the northern shores of Lake Tanganyika. People didn't swim there. They didn't fish from the banks. Some villages even moved away entirely. Because when Gustav showed up, something, or someone, disappeared. Some reports claim he's responsible for the deaths of over 300 people. That number is debated, but even a fraction of it is enough to crown him one of the most dangerous crocodiles in history. Victims were often found with deep bite marks, but many were never found at all. Boats would go missing, tracks would lead to the riverbank, and then, nothing. People started to say he wasn't just an animal, that he was a demon. In the documentaries that followed, Gustav seemed more like something out of a monster movie than a real predator, and yet, every frame of footage, every interview with terrified locals said otherwise. He was the jaws of the jungle, huge, stealthy, and impossible to stop. His body is covered in scars, deep marks from past battles with rivals and wounds from bullets that bounced off his armor-like skin. One of his most distinct features is a large bump on his snout and a missing tooth. Those features helped experts identify him even when the lighting or water was bad. To this day, no one knows if Gustav is still alive. He'd be well into his 70s now, which is old even for a crocodile. But his name still sends chills through the communities along Lake Tanganyika. People avoid the water, they warn their kids not to go near the banks. Because even if Gustav is gone, the fear he created never left. He was never captured, never caged. He lived wild, hunted freely, and outsmarted everyone who tried to stop him. If Gustav ruled the rivers, the Champawat tiger owned the jungle, and the villages too. She wasn't just feared, she was a ghost that struck in broad daylight, a Bengal tigress that moved between Nepal and northern India like the wind, leaving behind only silence and blood trails. Her number? 436 people. That's not a myth, that's a confirmed body count recorded in official documents. And yet, no one could stop her. She started her killing spree in Nepal, where terrified locals abandoned entire villages. The government tried to hunt her down but failed. Eventually, they pushed her across the border into India. That didn't stop her, it only gave her more ground. She took lives from huts, roads, and fields. She wasn't afraid of humans, she preferred them. No tiger had ever killed like this before. And that's what made her so unpredictable. She didn't lash out in panic, she stalked, she waited, she hunted. Villagers lived in constant fear, doors were bolted, children weren't allowed outside, even the army didn't want to deal with her. It took Jim Corbett, a skilled hunter, to finally track her. He spent days studying her habits, learning her routes. When they finally faced off, she wasn't scared, she charged. Corbett eliminated her with a well-placed shot. An autopsy revealed something shocking. Her teeth were damaged. She couldn't hunt traditional prey, so she turned to something easier: us. Her death ended a nightmare, but the story didn't fade. It became legend, a reminder that even the most majestic predator can become something else entirely when desperate. The jungle doesn't care who you are, and sometimes nature stops following the rules. Thousands of miles away in the snowy forests of Hokkaido, Japan faced a monster of its own. In 1915, a massive Usuri brown bear descended from the mountains into a small settlement in Sankabetsu. What happened next was so terrifying it's still taught in schools. The bear attacked multiple homes. It broke through doors like paper. Inside, people barely had time to react. The creature didn't just come once, it kept returning, for days. That's what made it different. Most animal attacks are one-offs. This bear came back again and again, hunting the survivors. It wasn't driven off by noise or fire. It seemed to learn. Each time it struck, it was faster, more brutal, and more fearless. Entire families fled the village. Men armed with rifles were stationed at the edge of the woods, but it wasn't enough. One of the most chilling parts? The bear used the same paths each time, moving like a trained predator, as if it knew the land better than anyone else. Some claimed it had a taste for revenge. Others said it had simply discovered that humans were easy targets. Eventually, a skilled hunter named Yamamoto was brought in. After an intense search, he found the bear and shot it. It took several bullets to bring it down. When it finally collapsed, the village breathed again, but it was changed forever. Even today, a replica of the beast stands in a small museum near the site. Not to glorify it, to remind everyone that nature doesn't always stay in the background. Sometimes it comes knocking, and sometimes it wears the face of something no one's ready for, just like it did in the hills of France. Before werewolves haunted horror movies, one real-life beast terrorized the French countryside. In the mid-1700s, in a quiet rural region called Gévaudan, something began attacking people, and it wasn't acting like any normal predator. This thing moved like a ghost, struck in broad daylight, and ignored livestock. It went straight for humans. Eyewitnesses described it as massive, with reddish fur, a long tail, and terrifying teeth. Some said it looked like a wolf, but much larger. Others swore it wasn't a wolf at all, something different, something unnatural. Within months, the fear spread across the country. Locals armed themselves. France sent professional hunters and even military troops. Still, the attacks kept coming. Over the span of just a few years, the beast of Gévaudan was blamed for over 100 deaths. People began whispering it was a punishment from beyond. Others thought it was an escaped exotic animal or some twisted experiment gone wrong. Some even claimed there were multiple beasts. The King of France finally sent his best marksman, Jean Chastel. In 1767, Chastel shot a large wolf-like creature said to be the beast. After that, the attacks stopped. But skeptics argue it wasn't the same animal responsible for all the terror. To this day, no one really knows what it was. Maybe it was a mutated wolf. Maybe it was something else entirely. What's certain is that it haunted the forest of Gévaudan like something out of a horror film. If Netflix ever picks it up, don't be surprised. This story writes itself. Now let's fast forward to the heat of summer 1916, the Jersey Shore, beaches are packed, and beneath the waves, a nightmare is heading toward the coast. Over the course of just 12 days, a series of shark attacks rocked New Jersey like a scene straight out of Jaws. Except this was real, and it happened decades before the movie even existed. It started in Beach Haven, where a swimmer vanished in shallow water. Then another attack in Spring Lake. Panic spread fast, but the part that truly shook everyone? The shark didn't stop at the beach. It swam into Matawan Creek, a narrow, muddy waterway miles from the ocean, and attacked 3 people in one afternoon. That's when fear turned to full-blown hysteria. People avoided the water. Armed men lined the shores. Newspapers across the country called it the shark scare. Eventually, a 7.5-foot great white was caught in Raritan Bay by a local fisherman. Inside its stomach were remains. Many believed it was the same shark responsible for the attacks. Whether it was the only one is still debated today. But it ended the terror. These attacks completely changed how people saw sharks. Before 1916, most folks thought sharks weren't dangerous. That myth shattered fast. Even scientists had to rethink everything they believed about sharks and their behavior. The 1916 attacks inspired Peter Benchley to write Jaws, which turned into the Spielberg blockbuster that made an entire generation think twice about swimming in the ocean. And while most sharks today pose no threat to humans, the memory of those 12 days still lingers like a shadow under the waves. So next time you're walking along a calm shore, remember, sometimes danger doesn't roar. Sometimes it swims silently, right beneath your feet. In the quiet town of Bunawan in the Philippines, something massive was lurking beneath the muddy waters. People whispered about missing livestock, and then, a missing fisherman. The villagers were scared, and for good reason. Something powerful was out there, and it wasn't just passing through. That something turned out to be Lolong, a saltwater crocodile so enormous it broke world records. When he was finally captured in 2011, the scale told the story. Over 20 feet long and weighing more than 2,300 pounds. He was the size of a small boat, with jaws strong enough to crush anything that got too close. Catching him wasn't easy. It took weeks of tracking, dozens of men and steel cables designed to hold down trucks. They named him Lolong after one of the local crocodile hunters who helped with the mission, and sadly passed away before seeing the capture. Lolong was believed to have been behind several attacks in the area, including the disappearance of a young girl and a fisherman. Although the exact numbers were never confirmed, his size alone was enough to explain the fear. The villagers turned the massive reptile into a tourist attraction, building a special enclosure and inviting the world to see the monster that once ruled their river. But captivity doesn't always work well for wild giants. Just 2 years after being caught, Lolong died of pneumonia and organ failure. His death sparked a huge debate. Should such creatures be captured at all? Or should they be left to rule their waters? Even now, the thought of Lolong sliding silently through the water gives people chills. Because he wasn't just a big crocodile, he was proof that some monsters are real, and they don't live in our imagination. They live in the rivers we don't dare cross. He looked majestic, graceful in the water, a favorite of the crowds. But behind the black and white beauty of Tilikum was a story darker than anyone expected. Tilikum was the largest orca in captivity, weighing around 12,000 pounds. He performed at SeaWorld, leaping through the air and splashing the front rows. Kids cheered, families snapped photos. But Tilikum wasn't born for the stage. He was taken from the wild off the coast of Iceland when he was just a calf. And captivity changed him. Over time, his behavior grew more unpredictable. Trainers noticed, but the shows went on, until tragedy struck. Tilikum was involved in the deaths of 3 people across his years in captivity. The most publicized incident happened during a live performance, when a senior trainer was pulled underwater. The incident shook the world and exposed a truth many hadn't seen before. A documentary pulled the curtain back on what life in captivity meant for animals like Tilikum. Tiny tanks, isolation, stress. Orcas are incredibly social and intelligent, and keeping one locked away from its natural world can create something unpredictable and dangerous. Tilikum's story changed everything. Public opinion shifted, protests grew. SeaWorld faced legal battles and eventually retired orca shows altogether. By the time Tilikum passed away in 2017, he had become a symbol, not just of danger, but of the cost of treating wild predators like circus acts. His story made the world look closely at how we treat nature and reminded us that the ocean isn't a playground. It's a world with rules we barely understand. In 1898, British engineers were building a railway bridge over the Savo River in what is now Kenya. It was supposed to be a symbol of progress, an iron path connecting coast to interior. But instead it became a trail of terror. Because out of the tall African grass came 2 lions unlike any the world had seen. They didn't roar, they didn't hunt like the others. They stalked silently. At night they crept into the workers' camps, dragged men from their tents and vanished into the darkness. Workers fled, construction stopped. The British Empire, known for its discipline and order, was suddenly at the mercy of 2 predators. These lions weren't normal. For one, they had no manes, which made them even more terrifying in the moonlight. And they weren't killing for survival. They were hunting with eerie focus. Over the course of 9 months, dozens of workers vanished. Some say it was 30. Others claim over 100. The exact number remains debated. What isn't debated is the fear they created. Lieutenant Colonel John Henry Patterson, the man in charge of the railway, made it personal. He spent weeks setting traps, building blinds, and staying up through the night. It became a deadly game of wits. Eventually, he shot both lions, after several failed attempts and 1 narrow escape. When he finally eliminated them, their bodies were massive, their stomachs reportedly filled with remains. The lions were later stuffed and are now displayed at the Field Museum in Chicago. Standing in front of them, it's hard to imagine these quiet, still creatures once held up an empire's grand project. But they did. Down in the murky swamps of Alabama and Florida, there's a legend that refuses to die. His name? Two-Toed Tom. And yes, he really did have only 2 toes on one of his feet, thanks to an old bear trap that mangled the rest. But what really made Tom famous wasn't his limp. Local stories from the 1920s tell of an alligator so large, so clever, and so aggressive that he terrorized entire towns. Livestock vanished, dogs disappeared. Then people started going missing too. The swamps whispered his name. He'd leave enormous tracks near water and disappear before anyone could spot him. When they did catch a glimpse, they swore he was at least 14 feet long, glowing red eyes and all. Farmers tried everything: rifles, dynamite, even full-blown gator hunts. One man allegedly dropped a keg of dynamite into the pond where Tom was last seen. The explosion sent mud and fish flying everywhere. But Tom? He swam away, untouched. Over time, Two-Toed Tom became something between folklore and fear. Some said he lived for decades, even resurfacing in later years far from where he'd first appeared. Others believed he was never just one gator but a line of monsters carrying on the legend. Still, no hunter ever confirmed the kill. Tom remained the swamp's ultimate ghost. What's fascinating is that his story isn't told with a wink. Older locals swear by it. Writers turned him into books. He even made it into newspaper articles. Whether he was one gator or many, one thing is clear: Two-Toed Tom left a big enough bite in southern folklore to last a century. Some predators don't wait for you to come into their territory, they come to you. And in the case of the leopard of Rudraprayag, that meant slipping into homes, temples, even crowded villages in the dead of night, and vanishing with its victims. This leopard haunted the town of Rudraprayag in northern India for nearly a decade. Locals were terrified to sleep. Doors were locked, fires kept burning all night, but nothing seemed to stop it. Between 1918 and 1926, the leopard was blamed for at least 125 human deaths. Not in the wild, not in remote forests, but in people's homes, sometimes just steps from their sleeping families. No animal had ever attacked like this before. It was bold, calculating, and unusually patient. It avoided traps. It knew when to strike. Some even said it had developed a taste for humans after scavenging during a past epidemic, when proper burials weren't always possible. The British government finally called in one man, Jim Corbett, the same hunter who had stopped the Champawat tiger. Even he admitted that this leopard was in a different league. It took him 2 years to track and finally shoot the beast in 1926. By that point, the leopard had become a living shadow. Every broken twig or snap in the underbrush sent people running. When it was shot, it looked like any other leopard. But to the villagers of Rudraprayag, it was much more than that. It was a symbol of fear, and its story became a warning across the region. Even the most graceful predators can become something far more terrifying when desperation takes over. The Nilgiri Hills in southern India are home to tea plantations, dense forests, and steep ravines. They're also home to tigers. Most of them keep to themselves, avoiding humans. But in the 1950s, one didn't. This young tigress began targeting people near the Sigur forests, and quickly gained a reputation as one of the deadliest cats in the region. She didn't hide. She watched. Villagers reported seeing her just beyond the tree line, still as a statue, waiting. Within weeks, she was blamed for 5 deaths. What made her particularly dangerous was her calm. No frantic charges, no chaos. She stalked like she was built for it. The attacks always followed a pattern. Someone would leave home for firewood or to check livestock, and never return. Search parties found drag marks, paw prints, and nothing else. Her confidence shook even the most seasoned trackers. The hunt to stop her was led by Kenneth Anderson, one of India's most famous hunters and authors. His writings later described the tigress as a powerful but tragic figure, likely injured at some point, unable to hunt her natural prey. That injury may have driven her to humans. It's a common thread with man-eaters. They aren't born killers of people, they're forced into it. Anderson eventually tracked her down after days of following her trail through dangerous terrain. It wasn't a clean kill. It was a hard-earned end to a chapter that had paralyzed a whole region. In the early 20th century, another shadow stalked the forests of northern India, this one with the sleek body and silent steps of a leopard. The Panar leopard, also known as Lari by locals, became one of the deadliest leopards ever recorded, blamed for the deaths of over 400 people. Most man-eaters kill a few victims, then vanish or are caught. Lari stuck around, for years. Like the Rudraprayag leopard, he didn't wait in the deep jungle. He moved in close, too close, into villages, even towns, sometimes dragging victims from open doorways. People began to treat the forest as cursed. They avoided trails. They built stronger fences, but nothing helped. The cause? Likely a combination of injury and opportunity. Experts believe Lari may have turned to humans after being wounded or after learning how easy it was to hunt us. During that period, widespread illness and famine had disrupted wildlife patterns, and wild prey had become scarce. That imbalance gave predators a reason to shift their focus. Once again, it was Jim Corbett who stepped in. After tracking the animal for days and interviewing terrified locals, Corbett shot and eliminated the leopard. In his later writings, he described Lari not as evil, but as a victim of broken ecosystems. Still, the numbers are staggering. Hundreds of lives lost. Communities changed forever. And one animal whose legacy still haunts northern India's misty forests. Wolves don't usually attack people. They're cautious, elusive, and rarely come near humans. But once, in the quiet winter woods of Sweden, a single wolf flipped the script entirely and turned a peaceful village into a place of fear. Between December 1820 and March 1821, one wolf went on a spree that made history. In the Gysinge region of Sweden, this animal attacked over 30 people and claimed the lives of 12. It was one of the deadliest wolf attacks ever recorded in Europe, and no one saw it coming. This wolf didn't act like others. It didn't sneak around the edges of farms or snatch livestock. It went straight into human territory, into roads, yards, even near front doors. Locals were stunned. They weren't dealing with a pack, they were dealing with one determined predator. The reason behind its behavior was as disturbing as the attacks. Records suggest this wolf was raised in captivity for part of its life, likely as part of a misguided attempt at taming wild animals. Once it escaped or was released, it had no fear of people. To it, humans weren't threats, they were targets. Panic swept across the countryside. Authorities called for hunters, and massive search efforts took place. The attacks continued until the wolf was finally tracked and shot. But the damage was already done. Gaisinge would never be the same. Her name was Topsy, and her story is both legendary and tragic. She was an Asian elephant who had spent most of her life performing in circuses, mistreated, misunderstood, and pushed past the breaking point. And in the early 1900s, Topsy made headlines not for a performance, but for the way her story ended. Topsy had become known for being aggressive. But when you look closer, the real picture becomes clearer. She had been abused by handlers and forced to perform tricks in chaotic, stressful environments. One day she finally snapped after being provoked yet again. Her fate was sealed not because she was wild but because she fought back. Her owners wanted to get rid of her, but instead of doing it quietly, they saw a spectacle. In 1903, they staged a public execution at Coney Island. And to make it even more shocking, they chose electricity. The footage still exists. It's hard to watch. A massive animal, once full of strength and spirit, brought down not by nature but by people. Topsy's story isn't about revenge or aggression, it's about consequences, about what happens when wild animals are taken from their world and dropped into one they were never meant to be in. Today she's remembered as a symbol, a warning about exploitation, and a painful chapter in the long, complicated history between humans and animals. We've seen crocodiles too smart to trap, tigers with silent footsteps, and sharks that changed beach life forever. But sometimes the most dangerous animal isn't the one hunting in the wild, it's the one pushed too far. These creatures weren't villains, they were survivors. And their stories remind us that even in the wildest corners of the earth, nature never forgets. That's about it. Which animal scared you the most? Write in the comments. For more useful information, watch other videos.